You probably hear all the time that life is hard, business is hard, and most people fail, but nobody actually cares to explain to you why people fail specifically. So that's exactly what we're going to be covering in this video and what you, more importantly, could do differently to prevent that from happening to yourself. Every single new endeavor, new activity, new sport, new business in life is going to observe four primary phases of growth. And throughout these phases of growth, your emotions will change. And when your emotions change, the disposition of your success or failure will change as well. So it all starts out in phase number one over here, which is what we call uninformed optimism. The reason why we call it uninformed optimism is because you don't quite know what the reality is. You don't quite know how difficult it's going to be. But at the same time, you're optimistic. You're excited. Picture yourself first starting out that business. You're probably thinking about all the money you're going to make, all the people you're going to help, all the clients you're going to fulfill and service. You're probably thinking about all of these things and you end up very happy, very excited. Your brain is actually flooded with dopamine, just infatuated about that feeling of enthusiasm and excitement trying to start something new. This is where we all start out in stage number one, in uninformed optimism. And then after this is where it starts to get a little bit interesting. We catch ourselves in the informed pessimism phase of things. Now, these questions that we originally had might actually be answered over here. We might actually start to see the reality of how difficult it might be. We might see the risks, the costs associated, the people that you might have to deal with, and all of a sudden now we're no longer optimistic, we're now going to be pessimistic, a little bit more negative with our outlook on the overall situation because now we have all the information. We realize that it's not necessarily all sunshine and rainbows. And this is where people actually start to quit, where people actually start to fail. But if you have that thick skin and that grit, you might find yourself moving towards phase number three, more commonly known as the Valley of Despair. And the reason why it has such a heavy name is because of how incredibly difficult it's going to be in this phase. And this is actually where the vast majority of people end up quitting, end up dropping off. Picture yourself, in that business, in those beginning phases of your startup. It's going to be so incredibly hard to find people, maybe to raise capital. Maybe you're going to encounter struggles. Maybe clients are going to get frustrated with you. This right here in the phases of growth is where the vast majority of people quit. They don't realize that pain and struggle is simply a necessity to the concept of growth. You cannot grow without actually having to undergo some degree of change or undergo some degree of difficulty and some degree of struggle. Picture a rose. A rose, before it blooms, before it blossoms and becomes something beautiful, has to push through dirt. And a lot of roses will never actually emerge from the surface. They'll never actually push through that dirt. And that's actually exactly where most people fail, in those initial phases of pushing through and those initial phases of struggle. Now, if you do have, once again, the thick skin and the grit necessary, you will find yourself over here in phase number four, which is going to be called informed optimism. Now, once again, you have the answers to those questions. You know how incredibly difficult it's going to be, regardless of the fact about how difficult it's going to be and the struggles associated. You decide to remain optimistic with a overall positive outlook on the situation. So if we were to further, describe this concept in a little bit more detail, showing the emotional spectrum and how it changes throughout the process, we start out over here at the very beginning. Once again, infatuated by that feeling of excitement. We feel so good. We feel so excited. Just talking about this thing actually creates dopamine in our head, and we just feel overall really good. And this right here is obviously going to be the uninformed optimistic phase. Now, what's going to happen to your emotions is it's going to start to change and it'll start to drop a little. You're going to feel a little bit of fear, a little bit of anxiety, And that's when you start to realize that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Once again, this right here, we're going to call the informed pessimism phase, where you start to become a little bit more pessimistic with your overall outlook on the situation. And then lastly, or rather second to last, we have the valley of despair, phase number 3, where the vast majority of people actually quit. But because you're somebody who has grit and has thick skin, you will not quit here because you understand that struggle is a necessity for growth. You cannot achieve anything amazing, you cannot build something amazing without having to struggle. And for those of you that do actually push through, we're going to end up over here at the informed optimism phase of things, where you know how it works, you know the intricacies in and out of the business, of the sport, of the new endeavor. However, you're optimistic because you can see that light at the end of the tunnel. So this graph right here, once again, perfectly illustrates exactly your emotional journey of growth through trying to start a new endeavor and why people fail. So to prevent failure from happening throughout this process, instead of feeling pessimistic, instead of allowing your brain to succumb to all of those negative emotions and quit because you can't handle the pain, understand that the pain is something that is good. It is something that is going to mold you into the person that you've always dreamt of being, into the person that is deserving of those results that you envision past stage number 4. So if you want to prevent failure, you need to prevent yourself from collapsing under the weight and under the pain of stage number 3.